Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is a home interview in Hammondsport, New York. The 30th of November 2006, approximately 3:30 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Well, my name is Richard Walter Falvey. I was born in Yonkers, New York, and it was on August 2nd, 1921.
Okay, what was your educational background before you went into service?
Just a high school graduate.
Okay. And I noticed you went to the School of Hard Knocks. Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, positively. That's very vivid in my mind. I was calling on the girl that turned out to be my wife, and while I was waiting for her to appear in the living room, we heard the news over the radio that Pearl Harbor had been invaded. I had no idea where Pearl Harbor was, but I said, those silly little fools will clean them up in a week.
Okay. Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted,
Why
which is another story.
Okay.
I don't know whether you're interested in that story. I always wanted to be a paratrooper or make a jump. I always wanted to jump out of an airplane. And that started when I was a young boy watching barnstormers up at the Armonk Airfield up there in Westchester County. And I went to a recruiting office to enlist and informed him that I have a crooked arm that I broke playing Tarzan and that I can't touch my left shoulder. And but I can touch my shoulder with the other hand. He said, you cannot get in the Airborne, they have to be perfect specimens and you'll not be admitted. I said, then I won't enlist. So a week later I went to a recruiting office in New York City and I went through the same sort of story, and the officer said, bring your arm up, and I brought it up, and of course I cannot touch my left shoulder. He said, well, what about the other arm? And I brought that up and I stopped right there. He said, there's nothing wrong with you, you're in. So I think he knew I was fooling, but he was glad to get somebody.
Where'd you go for your basic?
The basic training was airborne training from day one. The 506 Parachute Regiment was something I knew that the Army was trying out, and we were basically the guinea pigs for them. We came right off the street. Everybody had enlisted and wanted to be a paratrooper. And basic training started basically as airborne training from day one. It was a new experiment that the Army was trying, and as time proved, it was extremely successful.
What was your training like?
It was, well, as many people have described it, it was severe. It was, really tough. I was always a physical person. I ran cross country in high school, and I knew it was really tough going, but I felt this was the way the Army was. The training had to be severe or you weren't in the Army, and I didn't find any objections with it, but it was, from what I've read and heard, and now that everybody talks about it, it was very severe. And Colonel Sink, our regimental commander, he deserves all the accolades that anybody can give him, because he turned out a marvelous regiment.
In retrospect, after being in combat, do you think you were prepared? Your basic training prepared you for what you faced? Oh,
positively. Our training and what we did all through all of our training brought back memories when I was in combat. I said, well, we did this when we were in Tennessee, and we did this when we were in some other part of our maneuver area. It seemed as though the actual combat was just part of our basic training, that we were so well trained. I felt at times when we got around to the D-Day invasion that we had been overtrained. We wanted no more training. We wanted to get into the invasion or whatever was about to happen.
Okay, so you were assigned almost right away to the 506 then.
Yes, that was it. That was the only outfit that was there at Toccoa, Georgia at the time, and it was very basic.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to ask, where was your basic?
Well, it was in Toccoa, Georgia, and it was. Everything was on the double, and everything was hurry, hurry, and it was, as I said earlier, it was severe, and but I never felt that I could complain about it, except when they didn't give us much time to you know, take a shower and stand you know, for our regular training or in formation, and then go eat. You know, we always wanted to feel, and time seemed to be of the essence. It never seemed to be enough of it.
How long was your basic?
Well, we started in September, and it ended down there in Toccoa, Georgia, near the end of November. And then we made 118 miles from March from Toccoa, Georgia to Atlanta. And that was some sort of a new record. They were trying to outdo something that Japs had done. And this was supposedly a new American record and a new world record, that we had outdone what they had done. And from there, we took a train to Atlanta, to Fort Benning, and then our actual jumping training took place. And Fort Benning is where we actually learned what they wanted and what they needed for jumping.
Mm-hmm.
How long was your jump school? Was that 3 weeks back then?
Yes, actually then it was 4 weeks.
Okay.
But because we were so well trained and so physically fit, that the people that were in charge of the whole jump training down there in Fort Benning let him out on the deck. Well, stop. There was something that I had never been in an aeroplane before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that we had trained so hard and so severely for that it was with great anticipation, but they talk about making these jumps, they talk about butterflies, and I think I had the butterflies that day. And the man I was going to be second man out of the plane, and the first man ahead of me, he said, I'm going to hesitate a little bit, make sure you push me. Because if there was any hesitation, they'd put you right out. You weren't allowed to, you know, everybody had to go boom, boom, boom. And anyway, I pushed him out. And it happened the second time, he and I. And I said, from now on, you're going to find somebody else to push you. I said, I'm not enjoying this one little bit. And he just was afraid he'd be washed out. But he just wanted time to stand in the door and look, I guess, before he went. That wasn't allowed.
Did you have anybody that didn't complete the training?
Very, very, very few. I think I've read, this was something I read, nobody that I knew of. But I understand there was 3 or 4 in the entire regiment that just didn't make it. But it was, we were so well trained and so ready for it that I don't know how anybody could have refused. And there's another long story, but I won't tell you into that right now. But the first enlisted man to jump for the United States Army.
All right. When did you eventually go over to Europe, over to England?
It was exactly 1 year from the day I enlisted that we left Camp Shanks over there across the river, this side of the Hudson River, and headed for Europe on the SS Samaria. It was a British ship. It was actually 1 year almost to the day, from the time I went in till the time we left.
Now, when you left, were you already assigned to the 101st, or?
Yeah, we had been assigned about a month or so before we went to Camp Shanks to be sent overseas.
Okay.
We had already just been an individual parachute regiment, and that's when we learned that we were assigned, we were part of the 101st Division.
Okay, how long did it take you to get across?
I believe it was about 10 days. I have here in the house, I have every letter I ever wrote to my mother. And I have all the actual letters, and I've had them printed up, and I actually had somebody that put it on a computer, with a disc for the computer. And I'm hoping that my 3 children will get a copy of it one of these days. I had 3 copies made, but I still have them.
When you arrived in England, where did you go from there? I mean, where in England did you go?
Well, I think we landed in Liverpool, if I'm not mistaken. Someone had inquired about that here recently, and I think I looked it up and found it was Liverpool. And then we went directly from there to a little village called Airborne. And that was where the 2nd Battalion was located. They put the 3rd Battalion in another town and 1st Battalion in another place. There were just small villages. And the day that we arrived, we heard over the radio that Axis Alley was congratulating us on a fine trip over and knew exactly where we were. And that just, we couldn't believe that here everything was secret. We couldn't even write and tell our folks that we were going to England or where we were going to go. And Axis Alley over there in Berlin knew exactly where we were in England. It's unreal.
What, did you get additional training while you were in England?
It never stopped. It was ongoing, and it was day and night. You never were sure whether they were going to be. Sometimes it was all day, and then you'd have chow or dinner, and load up. We're going to go on a long hike tonight, and it never seemed to end. And we were hoping that the combat would end all this training, that we would do something that we felt was worthwhile, because it was just so repetitious. I can't think of all the number of foxholes that I would dig, and get them started. The next thing you know, you pack up, we're moving out.
Did you have much contact with the local people?
I personally did not. There was a lot of the fellows that did, and they inhabited all the pubs that were in the village, and some of them caused a lot of grief and trouble. But I think I was a stay-at-home guy. I didn't associate much with anybody other than our own troops while I was in the service.
How often did you write letters home?
As frequently as I possibly could. I had. The girl that I married, I was writing to her. Naturally, my mother was worried at all times. I had to write to her. And there was another young lady that I wrote to quite frequently. And there were relatives. So I did an awful lot of letter writing.
How did you receive a lot of letters back?
Yes. And mail call was very important. This was something that, every soldier was looking forward to. And maybe a package, but just getting a letter from home was a treat. It really was. And you didn't want to hear any bad news. And the letters that I wrote to anyone, there was never any bad news in it. I was always a positive thinker, and would guess maybe the war is going to end in 2 weeks, or the war might end before we committed, and things of that sort. And even after I got in combat, everything I ever wrote was of a positive nature.
Now, what kind of weapons were you trained on?
Well, I was trained on quite a number of weapons. I went into Normandy with a Thompson submachine gun, and then I went to up into Holland. I just had a carbine, and then after when we went into Bastogne, I had a it was a machine gun, and I'm trying to think of what it was called. The name won't come to me right now, and then the name's left me. It was just a handheld.
The grease gun?
No, it wasn't a grease gun. It was bigger than a grease gun, but the brain went blank. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I guess.
And bazookas. I ended up in a bazooka platoon. Eventually.
Okay. When you were finally getting ready for the invasion, did your amount of training increase? Or did you do many jumps at all when you were in England?
Well, that was the one thing that was ever edited out of my, because all our letters were always censored, and then that was the only thing that was ever cut out of any letter I ever wrote. I wrote that we had made a night jump, and that was several weeks before we went into the marshalling areas, and I guess they felt that would have been a tip-off of what we were going to do, that we might be going to jump at night. And we made several night jumps, and the first one we made, there were a lot of men injured, and some of our officers were injured, so the second night jump we made, no officers jumped. They didn't want to lose the officers, and so they didn't jump on the second night jump. It was just to see, how tactical it would be jumping at night, and how well the Air Force could drop us.
Okay, I guess when just before the invasion, were you present when Eisenhower visited the camp?
I don't remember Eisenhower visiting you mean just before the invasion?
Yes,
No.
yes.
Well, no, I don't think it was our particular field that he visited that night, because there were so many fields that
Right.
were being used. But there was an instance on one of the jumps we made was, I guess, to show the brass how well we could do and what we were capable of. I almost ran right into Churchill, and he and Eisenhower and so much brass you wouldn't know who they were or whatever. I came running out from behind a hedgerow, and there they were. I didn't stop to salute, I just kept flying and looking like I was supposed to, busy.
I guess, could you describe getting ready for the jump and the actual jump itself?
You're talking about the D-Day night.
Yes, yes.
Well, that was something, of course, you'd never forget that, and just loading onto the planes that night, everybody could have as many hand grenades or ammunition as they wanted, and just trying to get into a plane that night, we were so overly weighted down that everybody would actually have to be lifted into the plane. And I was very fortunate. I was the second man to leave the plane. And so I was, second to last man getting in at the end when we were loading up. And it was something we had waited for, something we wanted to do, and the time had come. And we felt with all the information and all the sandboxes and all the information that we had, that it couldn't be anything but successful. And I remember the flight over, and it was a beautiful moonlit night, and there was a Captain Hester that was going to jump just before myself, and then me, and then my best buddy. And I remember that there was 2 islands that we were supposed to, the way I always understood it, fly between. The island of Guernsey and, another name won't come to me now. But anyway, we was to fly between the 2 islands, and there would be a light by a British ship or something that would come straight up in the air to let you know they were on course. And as soon as we hit French soil, see, the Cherbourg Peninsula sticks out like a sore thumb, or like a thumb, and we had flown around to the far side of it, and just as we hit French soil, a red light came on that we were to stand up and hook up as soon as we hit French soil. And the actual, which I've learned in later years, the actual flight time over the peninsula was only 11 minutes. And that's a short time to hit all the drop zones that we were supposed to land at. And but I know we were on over French soil for several minutes when I remember saying to the captain, boy, oh boy, what a surprise. What a surprise, because at that time we had stood up, we were hooked up, and being second man, I could see outside the plane. It was, I could see what was going on, and we ran into cloud cover, and the planes would look like they were trying to take evasive action, and it was up and down. It was a wild ride there for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, it just looked like Christmas all over again. Between the tracer bullets and the anti-aircraft fire coming up, it was all hell broke loose. It was just, suddenly it came upon us, or we came upon it. And this is when the pilots, I don't know whether they were trying to take evasive action or they didn't have any choice with the way the clouds were. And I can remember looking out the door, and I saw a plane just blow up into a ball of fire like you'd see on these pictures you see on television. And I can remember saying, dear Lord, let me out of this plane, just give me a fighting chance. They never had a chance. And that turned out, that was the company headquarters of E Company, which was the Band of Brothers. Their plane blew up, the headquarters company plane. And so eventually the light went on for the green, and out we went. And well, there was Captain Hester, there was myself, Richard Falvey, and Otto Sykes. And of the 3 of us, not one of us to this day could ever remember who else was in that aeroplane. We've never been able to find out who else was in that aeroplane. We know there was more than 3 of us. There probably was 18 of us in that plane that night. And we have never been able to find out who else was in there. Supposedly Captain Hester was to have a list, and the pilot was supposed to have a list. And nothing ever materialized.
So did you have a bag of equipment with you, or?
I wasn't carrying
What did you
nothing
have?
other than just what was the basic necessities, and probably more ammunition than I thought than I needed, but I had it with me because everybody wanted a little more than just in case. And the three of us, being that we were basically right at the door, I think we must have ridden each other's back out of the door because we landed all very close together. The three of us, actually I was in an apple orchard, and I was still trying to get out of my chute when Otto Sykes came upon me, and he said he only landed about 50 feet away, and he helped me get out of the chute. And we had no idea as to where we were. There was small arms fire, not right immediately, but it was close on. It wasn't in the far distant, and we had no idea as to where we were or what was going to happen.
Were you receiving fire as you were coming down in your chute?
If I was, I never knew it. I was never even prepared to land. All of a sudden, the ground came up and hit me, and it was. I don't think we were more than 500 feet off the ground when we left the plane that night, and it seemed like an awful short drop. I remember just looking up once and seeing the chute look good, what I could see of it, and it seemed like immediately after that I hit the ground. But I don't remember any immediate fire that close by that got my attention.
Now, how long before you met up with your captain? You said the three of you went up.
It was quite a story as to how we were supposed to assemble. Leave him alone out there. Don't bother with the dog. Let him howl. We don't need him. Unless are you picking it up? Would you pick it up on the sound?
Naturally stopped.
Yeah, sure. Well, if he starts again, I'll cut it off for a moment. And I'll go in. I'll let him in. I can keep him quiet.
Okay.
Where were we? I've forgotten where we were at the moment.
About meeting up with your captain.
Oh, well, the plan that we had been told about that was supposed to work, and this is everything was perfect with the way they taught us before we left and loaded up in the planes, that the 2nd Battalion was to land in a big field. And one side of the field would be D Company, and the other side would be E Company, and the other side would be F Company, and the other side would be Headquarters Company, and each company would have a different colored light. That somebody in that company or several people would have a light that they would hang up in a tree, and you would assemble on the tree or on the light. Well, as the years have gone by, I realized there isn't a big enough field in all of Normandy that could land a whole battalion. That was the plan. Captain Hester had a light with him. And one of the first persons that he came on after he'd gotten himself organized asked this fellow to climb the tree and put a light up in the tree. And as it turned out, and I've learned this in history as years have gone by, we at that night had one of the biggest assemblies of airborne men that arrived or that came together on D-Day. We had over 180 people that had assembled that night. So there were other planes that landed not too far from us. There was 82nd men, there were men from other companies and other battalions, and we turned out to have the biggest group ever assembled on D-Day night. There's a story that goes with this, and I don't know how much you want me to digress, but there was a Lieutenant Nixon, which you'll see if you've seen anything of the Band of Brothers. Yep. And he was a drinker. Well, he appeared or came to this light that Captain Hester had put up. And Captain Hester said, "Next, you speak good French, find a farmhouse, find out where we are. We have no idea as to where we are." No one had any ideas. Nothing looked familiar. So off Nixon went. And he was gone for several hours. And finally Captain Hester said, we can't just stand here forever. We've got to move on. Day hadn't broken, but you knew day was very, very close to breaking. We didn't hear it crack, but it was not far off. And he said, we've got to move out. We just can't stay in here and do nothing while we were looking for Nixon. And he had made up
so far you hadn't encountered any resistance?
No resistance whatsoever. I can show you on a map exactly where we were, and there were two basically hardtop roads or macadam roads, And we had assembled on a little dirt road that sort of intersected the both of them. It was like a farmer's road that was not traveled. And this is where the assembly had taken place. And Captain Nixon finally said, well, we can't wait any longer, we have to move out. And just as we started to go, Nixon arrived on the scene, and he said, you're going the wrong way, we have to go the other way. So he directed us as to which way we should go. And I have a letter from this Captain Hester that, with proof of the story that I'm telling you, that he wrote and told me this story and, with a letter that he had sent me years later. So that was part of that Nixon story of the Band of Brothers. I found him to be a great guy, except that I've never known him to stumble, but he was a drinker.
Okay, after you, the daylight broke, where did you go?
Well, as we moved out, and dawn was there, you know, it wasn't daylight really, but it was dawn. And we had moved out to the way direction he said, and I remember we made a left-hand turn, and then we made some sort of a right turn, and there was this area that had been bombed intensely and extensively. There was nothing but bomb craters. The road was not even visible. And I can remember looking out, and there wasn't a leaf on a tree. And I really get sort of goosebumps when I think about this. This is no man's land. I never dreamed that we were going to walk into something like that on D-Day in Normandy. But this was the place near where there were big coastal guns, or supposedly there was coastal guns, and our Air Force, or the British Air Force, had extensively bombed this area, and nothing but bomb craters and no leaves on a tree. And the people, a French faction over there that lived there, told me in later years when I spoke to them, they can remember living 6-8 miles away and the ground shook from the bombing that took place. But that was to eliminate the coastal guns that the Germans had placed. And that was the beginning of the day as we started out, and then we had, this road was taking us right down towards, our objective basically was there were 4 causeways for the men coming in from the beach they were to land on, coming into the main land of the Cherbourg Peninsula. And our main objective for the 2nd Battalion was causeway number 2. That was the main objective. And by the time we got there, it was later in the afternoon. The causeway was more than well secured. The men coming in on the shore were coming in with tanks and trucks, and it looked like a wonderful, successful day. Then when I look back on the things that I've seen in history, what a horror Omaha Beach was compared to Utah Beach. And actually I got down on the beach later that day looking for some communications equipment. I was a communications sergeant at the time, and we didn't have any radios, we didn't have any batteries, and our officer said, let's walk down to the beach. So we hiked to the beach, and occasionally there was a shell coming in, but there was no pandemonium, and everybody looked ill at ease, and things were moving along very rapidly. We weren't able to get any radios, we weren't able to get any batteries, but the officer said, well, this was a lesson in futility, but let's get back with the outfit. And the tanks were coming in, and we asked the tanker for a ride, and we climbed aboard the tank, and he took us back to where we wanted to go. And the story that I always think about is that I remember getting off that tank at a crossroad, and there was a photographer with an old crank photographer's camera thing taking pictures. And in some archive, someplace, somewhere, I'm sure I'm on one of those pictures. But everything looked like a very, very successful day as far as that I could see. We had one instance earlier in the day where there was an 88 that was firing a straight trajectory, and they had discovered where it was. Somebody knew just about where it should be, and one fellow was going to, a fellow by the name of Virgil Kimbling. He was a machine gunner of the 2nd Battalion, and he had volunteered that he would, if we'd give him enough cover, and we'd get down to near where the gun was, he'd run up and drop a grenade down the barrel. So about a dozen of us headed down the hedgerow, and we started just firing indiscriminately in all directions, but not low. We were trying to protect Virgil. And we finally located where the gun was, and just fired, weren't firing at anybody, but just shooting. And the next thing you know, Virgil appeared on the scene, ran up to the gun, dropped a grenade down the gun, destroyed it, and back we went to the highway again. It was something that seemed extemporaneous. It was something that happened, paid no attention, we didn't even look for Germans. The gun was gone. But that particular gun was firing what they call straight trajectory. It wasn't, might have been putting one down on the beach once in a while, but it was a case of boom, boom, that fire, as soon as it exploded from the gun, it would explode out near where we were. But, just one of those stories. He got a big, I don't know, the French decorated him for something that he did, for what he had done. It was one of the great rewards that the French gave. I don't know what the actual medal was, but it was one of their big medals that they gave out.
Where did you go next?
Well, there was a little village called St. Comte-de-Mont, which was not well, one of the main lines as you come up from the beach. And we walked through that village, and darkness had started to come upon us, and we were told to sort of think where we should be and get in this particular area, and form two-men guard duty type of thing, buddy-buddy stuff, and that's where we would spend the night. And actually we went in with 3 days of K-rations on ourselves, and we had pretty much gone through the boxes and thrown away what we didn't want and carried them in our musette bags. And so each man was sort of independent with what he was going to eat, because they didn't have any food to feed us. And I know I buddied up that night with Otto Sykes, and it was a long, long night. And supposedly it was going to be 2 hours on and 2 hours on, but I think we'd been better with maybe an hour on, an hour off. And there wasn't much that took place that night. It was rather quiet, a little firing off in the distance, but not right where we were. And finally dawn broke, and we started D+1. And shortly after that, I don't know whether you want me to carry on.
Sure.
Yes.
So shortly after we took off, we decided, somebody in the higher echelon decided where we were going and what we were going to do. We started down this highway or road, and we came to a little village called Vierville. There were one or two of our companies that were out ahead of us, and I was with headquarters company, and quite a firefight started to take place. There was shooting from the other side of the road, and we'd actually meant we were firing back. We weren't seeing anybody, and I don't know what they could see of us, because the hedgerows had us covered pretty much completely. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. It kept getting worse as time went on, and eventually 2 tanks arrived on the scene, and I remember they just laid their 75s right on top of the hedgerow, and they have 50 caliber machine guns, and they just poured it on. It was unbelievable, between firing the 75s and then just pouring all this ammunition from the 50 caliber machine guns out into the area who we were shooting at. I never saw an actual person, but finally the white flags went up, and to make a long story short, and it's documented, there was the 6th Parachute Regiment, I think, of the Germans. I think it was their 6th Parachute Regiment it was called, and that day we counted 125 dead and 125 captured, and that's pretty much round figures of what took place that day. And we lost 1 man. We lost 1 man that day. It was unbelievable. That was about as tough as it could get that particular time, but it was a case of everybody was on one side of the hedgerows, and they were down. They got themselves backed into a swamp where they couldn't back off. They got cornered where they couldn't run away. And we had met up with the 6th Parachute Regiment actually 3 times while we were in Europe. They were tough young paratroopers that the Germans had.
How long were you in combat during that period after D-Day?
Well, they promised us 3 days and out. So it was like 33 days later before we were completely relieved, and we went back to England for, as we used to call it, bigger and better missions. So, the main thing was, after we had taken, the beach was secured, whatever, and the causeways and all, the next thing was we had to get a line cut across the Cherbourg Peninsula, because the main force that came in at Utah Beach was to get up to Cherbourg as soon as possible and secure the deep water port. And our next objective was to cut off the Cherbourg Peninsula completely so the Germans couldn't get onto the peninsula. And we did that, and then I guess our next big objective was a little town, it was a pretty good size, called Carentan. And that was where I experienced the worst day that I had in World War II.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. That was my next question.
Oh.
I knew you
But after Carentan had been secured, we went on out securing the perimeter around Carentan, and I have no idea, I wasn't up on the front line where the actual face-to-face combat was taking place, but there had to be people that knew where we were, the headquarters and whatever, and where the main group of the 506 Regiment was, and the shells never stopped coming in. They just never stopped. I can remember, had a young fellow next to me, I can't remember his name, he started asking for his mother, and he mumbling and wasn't making any sense at all, and I had to call a medic to take care of him. And it was just a short time after that, you know, I'm talking, I don't know whether it was a minute or two or half an hour later, whatever, I actually got blown right off the road. A shell landed, I didn't hear it, and it lifted me right up and put me in a ditch, and I never got scratched. But then during that same day, in the same period, I can remember lying on the ground, shells came in and you drop to the ground, and actually pulling grass out from my face to hope I could get my head down just a little bit lower. And it was, I just thought they'd never run out of ammunition.
Now this was German fire.
German fire, right?
Uh-huh.
And this was the day, as I remember it, and I think it was documented somewhat at this Band of Brothers thing, that this is a point when some of our tanks appeared on the scene and changed the whole aspect of the day.
What date was that?
June the 13th. So it was 1 week after D-Day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, when you guys went back to England, where did you go? Back to your original base? Or?
We're back to our original base, and this thing I always think about is that, you know, we left our barracks bags, and I couldn't find mine after I got back to the base. And those that had stayed back at base camp, and I, you know, asked them what had happened to some of the barracks bags. He said, "Oh, Falvey, good heavens," he said, you met a glorious death. You were a real hero. You're dead, but your bag is in with the dead pile." So I went over and found my barracks bag in with the dead pile. But somebody had come back with a story about what a great soldier I had been.
Jeez.
Now between then and your next action, which was what, in Market Garden?
Yeah, that was going into Holland.
Yeah, what, training again?
Well, yeah, they took us, they started all the training again, and then we had an influx of all the men that had been lost.
Mm-hmm.
We brought in an awful lot of replacements,
Mm-hmm.
and it was trying to get them in the same sort of mode and condition that we were in, and the same sort of thinking that we went through. But the story just prior to this that I didn't mention earlier, that was, I was in a communications platoon, which were men that laid out the wire for radios, or for telephones, and I was the radio chief in our battalion. and we also had fellas that would what they call the message center, and code decoders and all that sort of thing. But on one particular day, one of the radio operators that was with D Company, his name was Joe Slazarzik, he came by with D Company and he said, "Sergeant, I'm tired." He said, "I need some relief. Get somebody else to handle the radio." And I said, "Joe, there isn't anybody available right now, but if somebody shows up, I'll send them out and give you some relief." Joe was killed that day. And I made my mind up right then and there after I'd heard the story that I would never send somebody out to do something unless I was going to be with them. So when we returned to England, I went into the orderly room and talked to the officer in charge that I wanted out of the communications platoon, and they were forming a Bazooka platoon. And I said, "As long as you're forming something new, I'd like to get into it." So I said, "I don't care whether you break me down to a sub-private or whatever." And he said, "No, we'll keep your rating, and he needs sergeants anyway, so so we have a lot of recruits coming in." So I kept my rating, and they formed the Bazooka platoon, which was not part of the regular table of organization. It was a bastard platoon, but they felt it was very, very necessary because they found that many instances in Normandy where a bazooka was a necessary thing, which we originally hadn't had.
Now, how many in a bazooka platoon?
Well, you'd have a squad, there'd be 3 men to a gun, and 2 men would actually carry the ammunition, 1 man would carry the gun, and of the 2 men on the gun, 1 would load it, and the other fellow would, take care of the ammunition.
Right.
So there was 2 of them to each squad. So we had about 45 men in the platoon.
Okay.
What did you think of the bazooka?
It was a marvelous weapon, and then when you look back at what it was then compared to what we have today, it was nothing more than a stovepipe, really. But it did an awful lot of good. It did an awful lot of good, and it became a necessity. They realized after Normandy that a bazooka was something that was very necessary. Now, of course today they have so many different kinds of weapons that I'm not familiar with, but real high-tech stuff today. But back then it was not much more than the stovepipe. And it was destructive. It would do a marvelous job.
Now, did you get any time off in between Normandy and your next jump?
Well, that was the next thing. We, as soon as we arrived back in England and got our feet on the ground and got our barracks bags and started to get settled in again, we had a week off, and I had no place to go and really had no anxiety to go anyplace. Of course, some fellows couldn't wait to go out and tear the town apart, and Colonel Sink came and he went into every barracks and he said to every man, "You're going to get dressed, you're going to get your ODs, your official dress on, and you're going out. I don't want anybody hanging around the barracks worrying or thinking about what just took place. Go out and then raise hell." So that's what most fellas did.
And what about you?
Huh? Well, I went out, I don't know whether I raised hell or not, but I ended up going to London. And that was an instance in London where all dressed in our official garb, and it was hot. We're talking July in London. It was warm, very hot. And I had taken my tie off and put it in my pocket, and an MP grabbed me and told me I was out of uniform. I said, "Well, I've got the tie in my pocket, I'll put it on." He said, "That's not going to make it." He said, "I've got to take you in." I said, "How can you go home and face your mother and tell her that you fought in a war, that you were a soldier in a war, and you're going to arrest me for not wearing a tie?" Well, I went in, I had a court-martial and for not wearing a tie. So anyway, the report went back to the battalion and the officers just tore it up. I didn't get punished for it at all, but I was fit to be tied, to think that because I didn't have a tie on and I was ready to put it back on, that the military police, I guess they had orders, take no lip from the Airborne, let them know who the boss is.
You want to talk about your next jump then?
Well, the next jump, we went to an airfield getting ready to make a jump in a place called Chartres in France. It was, I think, just prior to, I think if I remember correctly, it was before they had taken Paris. And we were all primed and knew exactly what we had to do, and that we were warned that there was a lot of German Shepherd dogs that we might have to shoot or contend with. And suddenly the word came out, Patton's running wild, he needs maps and he needs gasoline. God bless you, Patton, you know, scrubbed the whole mission. And then finally we were told that this Operation Market Guard that we were going into, there was no backing off on this. This was for sure. And it was a daylight jump, and I can remember, I actually saw the British that were going to come in as soon as we hit ground. Cars and trucks and tanks, whatever, lined up for miles it seemed as we flew over. Oh boy, we're going to get lots of support in a hurry, so it seemed. And it was a Sunday, the sun was shining, and it was like a parade ground jump. We landed on a field that was, I don't know as I could describe it. No matter what direction you looked in, it seemed to be endless. And there were parachutes coming in all directions. And a lot of these new fellas that had come in as new recruits, there they were, cutting pieces out of their parachute or taking their reserve chute and trying to pack it in their bags. And I'm yelling, you know, fellas, this is no parade ground. But anyway, we finally got assembled and headed out. I can remember the first words we heard as we were heading. We had a little bridge in a place called Zahn. That was our first objective. We were to secure that bridge. And that was the main objective of our battalion. And we were marching down the highway in a long straight. They had jumped several miles from the bridge, which was, I felt, even to this day, was a mistake. If they wanted to secure the bridge, jump us on the bridge, let us grab it right then and there. But the word went out and became a familiar cry, bazookas up front. Bazookas up front. It seemed like we were always getting that word as time went on, not just that day, but as time, other days and weeks, they were always yelling bazookas up front. Somebody needed a bazooka for some good reason. And anyway, we hurried through the rest of the line and got down into this little village, and I can remember hearing well, it was a bazooka went off. There was some that had gotten out ahead of us, one of the other squads, and there was a gun, an 88, that was right in the middle of the road in this little village, and one of our boys had time to get down on his knee and aim the gun, and he put the gun out of commission, which was a great thing because they had things lined right up that was going to give a lot of trouble. And I was probably as close as I am from, well, less than a football field away when they blew the bridge up. And I can remember seeing the pieces flying in the air, and I wrote a little piece, little story that I wrote when I was over there about what took place that particular day. And I said, we think the Germans have a new secret weapon, watching the pieces of the bridge flying around in the air. But we were right there ready to take it when they blew it. And that was a day that I, just prior to getting to the bridge, I got hit with a ricochet bullet, which knocked me down. And I said, the fellas, keep going, I'll be all right. And I finally got up and looked at myself, and I was looking for some blood or whatever, and I couldn't find any holes, and I had a hole in my jacket. And make a long story short, the ricochet bullet stayed in my clothing, and I still have that bullet. But it actually knocked me down, and I was black and blue from my crotch right to my knee. And just was a very fortunate young guy. And I know one of our officer, I can't think of his name right now, he ran right up to that where the bridge had been with his pistol out. And, there were a couple of German fellas along the side of the canal, and captured them, but they were probably deaf by now because they were right there when the bridge blew. And, that held up the whole movement on the highway for at least 24 hours, till the British could come in with their bridge equipment and put a bridge in and get over the canal. But I read in the book, Band of Brothers, I think it is, or one of these books where Captain Winters, he was Lieutenant Winters then, and of course today he mentioned that he could not understand why they didn't jump us closer or on that bridge to secure it, and that's something that always went through my mind. and that was also something that I've thought about even way back then, was that they jumped the British 7 miles from the bridge that they were supposed to secure, the bridge too far in Arnhem, and which turned out to be an absolute disaster.
Do you think, did you see the British tankers, did you have a concern about them not moving fast enough?
Oh,
I know we had someone from the 82nd said they were really angry because they were cooking tea on the back of their tank engines and stopping for tea instead of pushing through.
well, they didn't move with the kind of finality that General Patton would have gone. I mean, he would have, I think he might have made this thing a success if we had the American tanks and American generals running this thing. But I can remember one instance about probably close to a week into the whole operation, and one night down there, a little town near Veckel, the Germans had broken through the highway, and we had come down from a little village called Uden down towards Veckel, and I remember it was sort of a misty, rainy evening, and I got caught in the middle of a field, and this is the story that I smile about when I tell it. Right out in the middle of it, and the fields in Holland were like a billiard table. They were so flat and long and straight, and I ended up in a furrow, and I can remember the bullets flying over the top of my head, you know, and oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, this, you know, I don't dare move. And I said, if I ever get home, and this is the craziest thing that anybody could ever think of, if I ever get home and survive this, I'm going to drink all the Tom Collinses that they can ever put in front of me. And that, in actual fact, that was a thought that went through my mind. But right as soon as this firing stopped, that had me pinned down, there was a British tank that was very close by, about as far as I am from here to our hedgerow out here, 150 feet anyway. And the tank was right up against some trees, and one of the fellas looked out by the highway, which was about 2 football fields away, and he says, there's a German tank just coming out of the woods over there. He's coming onto the highway. You could see it, and I could see it. And they told the British tanker, there he is, you better get him. Well, I've got to get orders from my commander. I can't fire until I get orders. Well, by the time he had orders, I don't know whether he ever tried, the German tank saw him and hit him and blew it up. And I can remember one of the British fellas trying to get out of the tank, and he only got about halfway out, and the tank burned and sizzled all night long. And, I just couldn't believe that these men, you know, if they saw an objective or something to shoot at, they had to get orders to fire. And there was also another instance where we were taking a small town, and we had worked our way into it, well, from noontime on until late in the afternoon, and it got very early evening. It hadn't gotten dark yet, and suddenly the men that were up ahead, they had basically got into the town, and the word passed back that we were working with the British, and the word was passed back, well, that's it for today, we're going to do it again tomorrow. And we retreated. It was, you know, the Americans would never have done that. I mean, they would have held the town and stayed with what they had and then move on from there. But it was their way of operating. And I think, you know, I would blame the British that it wasn't a successful mission. The whole planning of it just was a mistake. That was from my point of view, and who was I? So I tell everybody my war was 100 feet in front of me and 50 feet each side, and that was about all I knew.
Now, how long were you in combat at that time?
Well, they promised us 1 week. 1 week it would be out of Holland, and it was 72 days later that we were finally relieved. And that's when we came back, and we were going to have a big football game and have lots to eat. And while we were in Holland, we were up in Holland during Thanksgiving. And I can remember prior to the Thanksgiving day, I've got it written down what we had, but that doesn't matter. But I can remember writing a letter to my mother, and I have it, where I said, Mom, are you running out of time?
No, no.
But we're running out of time. Mom, if it's possible at all, send me some stuffing from the turkey. If it's possible, just send me some turkey stuffing. I've got it in the letter label too. I don't remember ever getting it.
Now, after your 72 days, where did you go?
I can't remember the exact name of the town, but it was had been a French. Well, the Germans had occupied it, and it had been a French army camp of some sort, and they were decent buildings that we were going to be in, and it was a pleasure to get into a decent building and a decent bunk, and life seemed to be good. We had a football game planned, I think, for Christmas, and it was going to be a big time. Men were getting furloughs to go to Paris, and everybody's hoping that the war was just about going to be over, and maybe this was our last shot at being in combat. And that's when we got the orders about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to pack up and get ready, get something to eat, and grab a gun, and we don't know where we're going. We loaded into big trucks, and they weren't army trucks that I can remember. They were great big long trucks that maybe you'd put cattle in them of some sort, and they were open-bodied. There was no roof to them, and we were packed in there like sardines, and off we went. And I can remember when it finally got dark, we traveled all that the day. I forget what time we left, but we traveled all that day, and when it got dark, they actually put their lights on for traveling. That was the first time I'd ever seen them use lights. You know, everything was blackout, and that's when we headed to Bastogne.
Now, did you have any winter gear at all?
Not that I can remember, but the only, I didn't have an overcoat. I had the regular army jacket, and by then they had stopped the Airborne from wearing jump pants and jump jackets. They wanted us dressed the same as all the rest of the infantry. They didn't want us to have something or look different than the rest, or whether the others were jealous of what we had and wanted it. But we all had standard outfits at that particular time. But I know I did have a sleeping bag, which they told us was equivalent to 2 blankets. I know I carried that with me because I used that as time went on.
You have gloves?
I don't remember ever having gloves. No, I don't remember ever having any gloves. I don't remember ever being issued gloves, except when our basic training, they used to give us gloves when we jumped. But other than that, I don't ever remember being issued gloves. Now, we had no winter boots or shoes. We just had our regular shoes that we were wearing. And they had stopped us from wearing jump boots because that was something that was different than the rest of the troops, and they wanted us all to look alike, and we had the regular, well, I guess what the infantry wore, where they had the regular shoe and then buckled across the little up leg. Came as high as a jump boot, but it wasn't a jump boot.
Okay, could you tell us about Bastogne?
Oh, good grief. Bastogne is unbelievable, and it's hard to even imagine, even to this day for myself, to think that we lived out in the ground. And I never got into a house, except that I got a scratch while I was in Bastogne. I went back to an aid station, and they put a Band-Aid on me and sent me back to the line again. But we lived in the ground out on the perimeter of Bastogne where we were located, and each day that you were at the particular same spot, you're going to dig your hole a little deeper and try to make it just a little bit more comfortable. And the food was very, very scarce, and it was the only time in my life that I ever thought that I was starving. And to this day, I can't remember ever being hungry since. People talk about getting hungry and they want to eat. I never feel hungry. But at that particular time, I honestly thought that I was starving, and I was scratching in the snow looking for any morsel that somebody might have dropped from a K-ration or whatever. But the feet, it was just, the cold was unbelievable, and somebody found thousands, I guess, of burlap sacks. And they brought them up, and we wrapped them around our feet, and I know I had 2 sacks on each foot. And I think they made the difference that I never ended up getting trench foot, because some of the men did. And you didn't dare take your shoes or boots off at night because you never knew who was coming through the line. So we had, with this sleeping bag that I was telling you about, that was equivalent to 2 blankets. we couldn't climb into it at night because you didn't take your shoes or boots off, and it would be impossible to get out of it if any enemy came through. So what we did, we cut the bottom out, we put slits on the sides, cut armholes in them, and we wore them. So we lived with the sleeping blanket on at all times, and that was what we did with them.
All right, I'm going to stop the.
Why don't you tell about that, how you kept your, well, you said you cut up your sleeping bags and that, used that as a cover. Now, did you ever see any Germans that were in white parkas, that were in a white camouflage?
They, one night I remember seeing this, and I don't know how true or whether I was seeing mirages or whatever, but we were told, let them come in. If they want to infiltrate at night, let them come in, because they're not gonna find anything. And I remember one night I thought I saw a couple of, there was only two that I saw, whether it was some kind of a patrol or if I was out trying to find out where our main line was or what we were up to. I thought I saw two of them, and they were wearing a whole white garb, whatever, because everything basically was white.
Now, you told how you improvised to keep your feet and your body warm. How did you keep your hands warm?
That is hard to remember. I don't even remember my hands ever getting cold, to be honest with you. And whether you put them between your legs like you would do if you're out hunting or try to do something of that sort. And how we survived, to me, has been a miracle, really. The whole story of being out in that kind of weather, as long as we were there. And, well, we did have cases of trench foot, but that was the only real disaster I ever heard from the cold itself.
How about when finally the tanks broke through into your lines? How did you feel when you...
Well, we didn't see them early on. We were at a far perimeter out from Bastogne, and out in the boony lands, we overlooked a little village called Foy and Noville. Foy and Noville were out in front of us, and it was country rolling hills sort of that we were looking out on. And we thought that we heard that the tanks had arrived and they'd broken through. That's fine. They were going to be relieved, and we'll now get back to camp or someplace for some rest. And that's when someone at the high echelon decided that's when we'd go on the attack. And then we started to push forward, and we had to take the little village of Foy and the little village of Noville. And then there was a place called Longchamps that had to be taken. And it was very disappointing. The morale at that particular point was falling apart, because we had it. We'd been in Holland so long and didn't have too much time away from there, then back up and living in this miserable winter, and then without the kind of equipment you'd really need, and not getting properly fed, there was time to relieve us. But here they put us on the aggressive, and we became on the offensive. And that was only for about a week or so, and then they finally said we were going to...
So how many days of combat were you in the Bastogne campaign then?
I've always said it was around 33 days is a number I've always used, using a round number like that. But, and then they told us that the 7th Army had bad morale. Their morale was bad, and if the 101st were sent down to the area where the 7th Army was, we could boost their morale. Now here we were, bedraggled and beaten, tired, but they thought that by sending us down there, our morale, we could boost the morale of the 7th Army. So the first night out after we left Bastogne, we stopped in a little village and told these people, they went through the little town and said, in 30 minutes men are going to come into your house, and you only can occupy a small part, and they'll occupy the rest of it. And the house that I stayed in, from one of our boys that could speak French, he said they were petrified. They thought we were the most horrible looking creatures they'd ever seen, and I can imagine what we must have looked like after being out there in the woods and what we had lived through for 30 days or more. And but they were surprised the next day, because most of us got to shave that night and clean up, and they were surprised to find a bunch of young men, boys that didn't look quite so horrible anymore.
Were you issued new uniforms?
No, we didn't get anything new till when we got down there in southern France there for a while. They did issue us shoe packs, but they told us don't wear them. And it didn't become necessary to wear them, so they took them back, so we never really got to use them.
What was your impression of Maxwell Taylor?
I had no real opinions of him. It was a higher echelon, the high brass. All we used to remark about him, he was a bigger and better man, missions, you know, that was the expressions we used about Maxwell Taylor. He was always looking for bigger and better missions. He was a brilliant man, spoke French fluently. I remember him trying to get up and address some people in the village of Carentan after we had secured it. And someone must have been, there had to be somebody that had communication with the Germans, because as soon as he got up to speak, and there was maybe 100, 200 people that had gathered to hear him speak, and he spoke in fluent French, and he no sooner got started and the shells started to come in, and that was the end of the speech right there. But I thought he was a very brilliant man, but you know, back then I might have thought, well, he's looking for another star someplace, one place or another. But I just thought he was a good leader.
But did you get any free time R&R in France at all?
I'm trying, no, actually no. They were sending men to Paris after we come back from Holland, and they cut that off as soon as the breakthrough came for the Battle of the Bulge. Mm-hmm. And so I actually never get any free time, but someplace along the line they drew names from a hat, and I was one of two men that name came out, and I got a trip to southern France, down near Nice. We flew down and we had a week in Nice, and that was just positively glorious. You know, lived in a big hotel and we ate well, and life couldn't have been more pleasant, living in Nice for a week, and then we flew back and back with the troops again. Mm-hmm. But by then there wasn't much shooting going on. Things were fairly quiet and not like it had been. And we knew there was a war going on, but not as severe as it had originally been. I felt we'd been through the worst of it. Mm-hmm. Hoped that we had been through the worst of it.
Mm-hmm. What were your impressions? Did you get up to the Eagle's Nest?
Yes, I actually saw Hitler's house. I didn't get into it.
Mm-hmm.
There were men guarding the house, and I don't know what branch of service was part of the 101st was guarding it, so people couldn't go in and tear it apart or do whatever they might do. Mm-hmm. And I can remember seeing it, and since I went back in 1986, and they had completely bulldozed it, trucked it out of there, dug a hole, and they buried it. And there'd be no souvenir hunters or any parts or pieces left of that house that anybody could claim was a souvenir. Mm-hmm. Or part of wouldn't be a shrine of any sort. Mm-hmm. It was completely done away with. But we had a race, you know, the race was to get to Berchtesgaden, and I think the word that I've always heard that somewhere along the line of command, the word was out they wanted us, the 101st, to get there first. And pretty much we were. Beautiful little town. Mm-hmm. Gorgeous.
How long did you stay in Europe before you were sent home?
Well, I left Europe. I didn't quite have enough points. I found out a year later when I got home a Purple Heart arrived, and if I had had that Purple Heart then, I don't know, I guess somebody keeping records, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
finally decided I had a Purple Heart coming.
Was that for Bastogne?
That was for Bastogne. I always said, all I had was my feelings hurt. But if I had the points for that Purple Heart, I would have been sent home early. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I was one of the lingerers, and I moaned and groaned and bitched about not going home. And they suddenly decided, we had captured, I didn't, but some men of our regiment had captured, they found a Hermann Göring automobile and a Hitler car, a couple of Hitler cars, and our country was then going through the victory bond drive, the final drive for the end of the war. And I was one of the men selected to come home with the cars, and I traveled from Washington all the way through the southwest, all the way out to Denver, and back again, stopping at little towns and villages all along the way. And I have a little little book where the officer that we had in charge said, Falvey, count the crowd. Always count the crowd and keep records of that. And it's better than 300,000 people that we saw on this victory bond drive that we traveled on. And I can't remember how many autographs we signed. It was like coming home as a hero, and couldn't quite understand it, but we'll accept it. And of course, all expenses were paid. You know, the hotels and wherever we stayed or wherever we ate, it didn't cost us anything. It was basically being eased out of the service. I was basically eased out of the service. It was wonderful.
Do you know what happened to those cars?
No, I really don't know what happened. One I've got pictures of them. One was a little sports convertible. Oh, it was a beautiful little Mercedes. And the horn played a special tune. And I was told that it was Hitler's car, and then since then, historians, whatever, tell me, no, that was Göring's car, and I traveled in a great big touring car, and they said, no, that was Hitler's car that I was in, but I don't know. I was told it was Göring's car that we traveled with.
When were you discharged?
I think it was around the 20th of December, just before Christmas in 45. It's the old expression, home alive in 45. The story that goes with coming home, and now here we came home to go on a victory bond drive. There was about 7 or 8 of us, and the orders read, the first available transportation out of Europe other than air. So we were going to come home on a boat or wait till they build the bridge. So we were the last ones aboard this ship. We were up at Camp Lucky Strike, and the ship was getting ready to sail, and they found room for us, and they put us aboard the ship. And I remember we were the last ones to get aboard the ship. Traveled all the way back to the States. We landed at Newport News, and the band was there on the pier playing Sentimental Journey. And boy, that song today would bring tears to my eyes whenever I hear it. Oh, there's nothing more wonderful than coming home. Oh dear, when you think about it, it's unreal. And so the fact that we were the last ones aboard the ship out of Europe, we were going to be the first off the ship. And I don't know what division it was that was aboard that ship. It was one of our divisions, combat division that was over there. And as we marched off that ship, the 7 or 8 of us that were on this trip coming back from the victory bond drive, the whole ship booed us because we weren't part of their organization, and why are we getting off the ship first? And I'll never remember that. There's the band playing Sentimental Journey, and we're being booed as we walked off the ship. What a homecoming. Unreal.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Tell you the truth, I don't think I ever changed any from being in the service and being in my the way I lived, and I never thought much of, I never even talked about it until this 50th anniversary thing came up, and I became one of the group that was going to make the 50th anniversary jump, and the media went crazy, and no matter where you went, they were chasing you around, and everybody wanted your autograph, they wanted your story. And that's when I pretty much, I guess the expression is, came out of the closet. But it wasn't a case that I was holding it back. Nobody was asking me any questions. My children didn't ask any questions, and I just didn't talk much about my time in the service.
How many of you made that 50th anniversary jump?
40 of us.
40.
But the criteria for making that jump was that you had to be a combat jumper. And because the 2 men that put this together had their first jump for one of them was in Holland, and the other fellow had jumped in southern France. But they put this together. We were called the Return to Normandy group. And of the 40 of us that jumped on the 50th anniversary, I think there was 19 of us that were actually D-Day jumpers. And it was a wonderful, wonderful affair, and the thing I'll never, never forget is the young children, no matter where we went or whatever, they, in perfect English, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was, and it was an emotional trip for me. We left so many men behind that, you know, it wasn't as joyous as I had hoped, but it was a wonderful tribute anyway to go back and do it again.
Now, what kind of plane did you jump out of?
C-47. Someone flew from this country, from the States, to come over there to be part of this, and only the men that had made the Normandy jump got to jump from the C-47.
Well, what do you think of the notoriety the Band of Brothers has received?
Well, it's hard for me to even put it all together. I think it's great. I think it's overdone. I just feel sorry for fellas of other divisions and other men that fought in such terrible, terrible conditions in combat and basically get no recognition whatsoever. You don't even know they had an organization or had a name or what regiment or what division they were part of. And the Band of Brothers has, there's an awful lot of Hollywood in the Band of Brothers picture. And I think the book that Stephen Ambrose wrote, Band of Brothers, was as factual as any that I have read of the account of what took place in the war. There's no doubt whatsoever that E Company was a group of men that stood up and were different than the rest of the organization. They really were. They were a great group, and I think this was pretty much in spite of Captain Sobel. Because he was one miserable SOB.
Yeah.
He really...
Now, what do you think? I think that's Winter's book, isn't it?
I think this might be Winter's right here.
Yeah, have you read that? What do you think of that?
There was two of them that came out. That was
One's
the
a
original.
biography and that one's his memoirs.
This one I like. This was by Winters.
Yes.
But there was
There's a biography.
no. Major Winters, Commander.
Yeah, that's
There
his
was
memoirs.
a fellow that he let write, you know, about him.
Yes, yeah, a biography, but that's his memoirs.
Yeah, all right. The memoirs were good, but the biography that this other fellow wrote, after I read one or two chapters, he was quoting Winters as using the Lord's name in vain and swearing and cursing or whatever, and that was not Winters. That was not Winters, and I think that's the reason Winters came out with the other book, just to offset what this other fellow had done. But he had sanctioned it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Because I spoke to Winters right after this Band of Brothers thing came out, down in Toccoa, Georgia, when they had the initial showing, and I asked him about some of the things that I saw, and he said, Red, they hired me as an advisor, and he said they paid no attention to me. They did it Hollywood way.
Okay. All right, well,
Do you have a picture?
Yes.
Yes, let him hold that up.
you sent us these two. Could you tell us where and when that was taken? If you just hold it like this.
Oh, did I send these pictures?
Yes, sir. If you hold it just like this.
There's that picture over there in the frame.
Oh,
This
yeah,
picture
I
here.
could get that. Just hold the one up and...
This picture?
Yes, and tell us where and when that was taken.
Well, this picture, I can't remember exactly where it was taken, but it was taken in 1945 before I was discharged from the service.
Okay, if you can hold that flat. Well, no, can you hold that up and I can focus in on it with the...
Can I answer my telephone?
Oh, sure.
No, did I give you enough on this? Because I cannot actually remember when it was done. It was done in 1945, before I was discharged.
Okay, I got it.
Now there's this one.
Will this show up better, or will you have a glare on it?
Just like that is fine.
Okay. This picture was taken over at, I'm trying to think of the name of the school I went to when they gave a little talk, and this was done by the staff at the school. And that wasn't Canasteel, Greenwood, there's another one over in that direction there. Addison, I think. No, this wasn't Addison at all. The brain is going. I can't remember the name of the
So
school.
when was that taken approximately?
This was taken 2 years ago.
Okay.
Okay.
Now tell us, what are those gold or bronze things next to your feet?
Oh, those right there in that picture. There were my two boots, or my just a pair of jump boots. And those boots I jumped in Normandy in 1944, and I'd taken very good care of them. My mother would put shoe trees in them, and when I was going to make the jump in 1994, I took them to a shoemaker and said, don't change them at all, just make sure they won't fall apart. And so I jumped with them again and twice. That was the second time in 1994.
And they're
Then I had
bronzed.
them
And
bronzed.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get a shot of them sitting over there.
Well, I could get them up here.
Oh, okay, yeah, if you want to hold them up because it's coming through kind of dark.
There was a medal that Francois Mitterrand gave us for what we did on the 50th jump.
Oh.
That good, or you want to pull them right there?
Hold them right there, yeah. They're bronzed. Okay,
They
great.
make good bookends now, that's about it. That's about all. And on the bottom I've had my name and that they had jumped twice in Normandy and the dates on it.
You want to focus on this? This is a medal he was given by Francois Mitterrand after the jump, after the 50th anniversary came. Let me-
Okay, it's a little dark, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh,
He's-
I'm sorry, I
he's
thought you
focusing
were
down.
handing it back to me.
Yeah, it's, okay, it's about as good as I can get it.
Oh,
All right, thank you.
thank you.